The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Alone in the Realm, a premium solo TTRPG podcast. I'm DV, your humble GM and adventurer. Alone in the Realm is a podcast where we let the dice drive the story, and we are along for the ride. No character is beyond death, and we let the dice lay where they fall. We'll be playing Mothership by Tuesday Night Games, and the slasher module, Vibechete by Joel Hines. I'm altering quite a few elements of both the hooks and the storyline to make it a little different from other Vibechete actual plays out there. Without further ado, let's jump into the plot. In this episode, the crew must abort the lockdown so that they can open the doors to the docking bay and escape on their ship. Let's set the scene. The chaos factor is at 7. I don't think things are in the control of the PCs at all at this point. So let's test the expected scene. Roll a d10, and I got a 5 versus a 7. That's an altered scene. I'll roll a d10 on the scene adjustment table. That's a 3. Reduce or remove an activity. To check what that activity is, I'm going to roll on the meaning tables. I get emotionally and return. I think I have an idea of what this might mean. Let's play it out. The crew begins walking down the access corridor, constantly thinking the clanking of the steam pipes is footsteps, and frantically looking over their shoulders. Rowena is still in an incredible amount of pain. Therese is finally coming down from her high, thus the emotionally return that I rolled earlier. The feeling of normal, though, is too much for her to bear in these circumstances. She decides to drift to the back of the crowd and retrieve another pill from her pockets. She looks at the 2 or 3 in her hand and realizes she doesn't know which pill does what. She debates for a moment, then pops one into her mouth. We get a 25% chance of a bad trip from this pill, so I'll roll a d100. I rolled a 35. No bad trip this time. Now I'll roll a d4 to see which kind of pill she took. The first pill is an ecstasy pill. The second pill is a downer. Third pill is a hallucinogen. And the fourth pill is just a dud. I rolled a 4. A dud. Nothing happens. Mythic fate check. Does Therese experience a placebo high from taking a pill that does nothing? I think it's likely. I rolled a 45. Yes. Therese waits a few moments, then lets out a brief giggle. She's not sure if she feels exactly as good as before, but she definitely feels better. A burst of steam behind them makes her jump, and she grabs Ollie's arm tightly. "You mind if I just hold on to this for a little while?" she asks sweetly, looking into his ugly face, all too close for socially acceptable. "Not at all, my dear, not at all." And he moves to give her a little kiss on the forehead, and she recoils. Maybe the pills are not as strong as she thought. She hangs onto his arm regardless, as the human touch does give her a little reassurance. After a few minutes, there's a door in the hallway marked South Generator. Denzel cautiously opens the door, shining his flashlight across the room. Despite her pain, Rowena follows closely behind, followed by Ada, then Ollie, then Therese. Everyone has their weapons at the ready. The room has a strong smell of rust and oil. Along one wall, a huge dusty flywheel generator sits idly, with a long metal crank attached. Maybe we can get this generator up and running, and we'll at least get the power back on outside, Denzel says. Ada doesn't wait. She lays down her crowbar, grabs the metal crank, and begins spinning it as fast as she can. Now I'll roll the ambush check. We get another +1, which brings our ambush score to 3. Roll a d10, +3. We get an 11, the slasher. The android spins the crank for several minutes, and the flywheel spins up in the generator. But as soon as she stops spinning it, it runs for a few minutes then stops. She tries again with the same results. It appears as though perhaps something else has to occur before this generator will engage. Perhaps we can find out more in the... And before she can finish the sentence, the slasher bursts in through the door, Vibechete raised. Now I'll roll a fear save for everyone. I'll do the initiative a little bit differently, and anyone who succeeds in their fear save can go first, then the slasher, then those that failed. Fear saves in the close presence of an android have to be at disadvantage, however. First we'll roll Denzel's fear save. We got a 46 and a 53 versus 38. Fail. +1 stress. Now we'll do Teresa's fear save. 24 and a 72 versus 27. She too fails. +1 stress. Ollie's fear save. 92 on the first one, so he's already failed. Versus his 25, +1 stress. Ada's fear save. She doesn't have to roll at disadvantage because she is the android. She gets a 95, however, versus 81, so she fails. +1 stress. Finally, Rowena. She rolls a 7 and a 5 versus her 49. She saves. So it looks like Rowena will react, then the slasher, then everyone else. Rowena attacks the slasher. However, she rolls an 80 versus 60. Fail. +1 stress. Let's see who the slasher attacks. We'll roll a d5. 1's Denzel, 2 is Therese, 3 is Ollie, 4 is Ada, and 5 is Rowena. 5. Poor Rowena. Rowena was standing watch over the door, and when the killer bursts through, she shoots, but her injured hand hampers her aim, and the shot rings against the wall. Seeing her as the nearest target, the slasher swipes out with his Vibechete. Slasher attacks Rowena. He gets a 3 versus a 65, a hit. Roll for damage, 4d10. 7. Wow, that was lucky. But it still causes a wound. She's now down to 12 out of 14 hit points, and she has 2 out of 3 wounds. Now we'll roll on the wound table. Once again, we have to roll twice, once for bleeding and once for gore. We rolled a 7. Limb severed. Bleeding +5, and death save in 1d10 rounds. How many rounds? 6. Since she already suffered a severed limb, I won't bother rolling a body save to see if the impact severs a limb. The vibrating massive blade cleaves through Rowena's left arm, bisecting it right above the elbow. Blood begins to spurt out everywhere, and she collapses in agony to the ground, wailing. Now I'm going to roll a panic check for everyone else. Denzel passes. Therese passes, Ollie passes, and Ada passes. Cooler heads prevail, apparently. Not enough time has passed for the slasher to heal, so he's still at 7 hit points, and has all 6 wounds. Denzel attacks with his hand welder, D100 plus his industrial. That's a 3 versus a 50, a hit. 1d10 damage, 6 damage. The slasher's now down to 1 hit point. Therese attacks with her laser cutter. D100 plus her industrial. She gets a 1 versus a 56. Another hit. 1d50 damage. 39 damage! He suffers 2 wounds and his HP is now 16. Let's roll on the wound table twice for him. The laser cutter can do bleeding or gore at advantage. Since I gave him 2 wounds, I'll do 1 for each. First, for his bleeding wound, we roll a 0 and a 9. That's an advantage, so we take the 9. His throat is slit or his heart is pierced. Roll a death save. On the gore table, we roll a 3 and a 3. So I guess it's a 3. His eyes are gouged out. Denzel and Therese stand side by side, and both let loose with their weapons. Denzel's welder burns into the arms of the monster as he slashes about himself. Then the laser cutter beam rakes across his throat and then the face of his helmet, shattering the bubble and exposing the meat sack of a head. One visible beady eye can be seen momentarily in the flesh before it's lanced by the laser. The beast staggers backwards out of the room and then lands on the ground heavily with a thud. Ollie and Ada both move to Rowena's aid and begin staunching her blood flow with a medical kit. While not strictly by the book, I'll do an intellect save with Ada to see how well she treats Rowena's wounds. Ada, intellect save. She gets a 5 versus a 58, a success. With haste, Ada begins wrapping the gory wound of Rowena's amputated arm, while Ollie holds her down. The treatment begins to staunch the blood flow rather quickly, and Rowena stabilizes, but she's still severely wounded and addled from the pain. Ollie reaches down and picks up the pulse rifle, aiming it through the door at the still monster. "Is it dead?" he says in a quivering voice. Rowena moans at his feet as he moves to get a slightly closer look while not exiting the room. Fate check. Does Therese try to give Rowena a pill to deaden the pain? I rolled an 18, yes. Ada begins packing up the remaining supplies of the med kit, then retrieves her crowbar from the floor. Everyone except Therese begins to move cautiously toward the slasher to see if he's still alive. Therese acts quickly and crams one of the pills into the dazed Rowena's mouth. She holds her nose so that the other woman reflexively swallows. "There, that'll make it all better," Therese coos while stroking the clammy sweat from Rowena's forehead. Rowena gets a 25% chance of a bad trip. I rolled a 7. Of course, Rowena gets the bad trip. Rowena gasps and sits up suddenly. She frantically begins to crab walk the best she can with one arm, away from the open door. "No, no, no," she cries softly. Therese bites her lip in consternation and tries to comfort the other woman, but Rowena violently swats her hands away. Ollie moves toward the body of the slasher and pulls out his bioscanner. It can be used from long range, so he keeps his distance and begins to scan the killer. Now, finally, we'll do the slasher's death save. We roll a d10, and we get a 0. It's simply unconscious. According to the entry in the adventure, the slasher can quote-unquote play dead and stop his heartbeat and breathing temporarily. Only a med scanner can detect brain activity. I'll rule that the bioscanner does not have this capability and does not show any life signs. Ollie has a smile creep over his face. "Dead! Take that, you son of a bitch!" And he does a little caper in the room. Denzel still looks worried, and he glances at Ada. She walks over to the corpse of the slasher and picks up the Vibechete. It's heavy in her hand, but she can still wield it after a few practice swings. "Just in case," she says matter-of-factly. "Let's get out of here. Ada, let's help up Rowena," Denzel says with exhaustion. They go to pick up Rowena between them, and they just assume her frantic cries are derived from her recent trauma, not some bad pills that Therese gave her. Therese doesn't tell them any differently, and they move on out of the room and further down the tunnels, leaving the corpse of the slasher behind. Warden note: as soon as they are out of sight, the slasher revives and teleports himself back to his cryopod, where he will begin to regenerate using his nanomachines. The crew pushes on ahead. Rowena, supported by Denzel and Ada as they dodge a few bursts of steam. Despite Rowena's serious wounds, they are of relatively high spirits. Ollie is taking point with the pulse rifle, and Therese is watching their backs. Before long, they come to another room, marked Employee Locker Room. They sit Rowena up against the wall so that they can all be ready if need be. They enter the room cautiously, weapons at the ready. They were not prepared for what they saw. One of the walls of the room is an exterior bulkhead wall, and it has a large breach in it, covered hastily with Plastawall temporary sealant and caution tape. They can see the starry void through the hole, and bloodstains accent the serrated edges of the metal wall. "That must have been the emergency that took the lives of the workers and closed this place down," Denzel said, pointing at the breach. No one answered him, so he turned his flashlight to see what they were looking at, and then he saw the hands. So many hands. There were amputated hands hanging from the ceiling, hanging from the walls, and there was one clutching a disc hanging over a strange chrome pad in the middle of the room. Ada moved forward to investigate it, and it reads, "Integrated Jaunt Pad 1.08, stenciled along the base. Red lights animate toward a bullseye in the middle of the pad. Check for an ambush. Score is currently at 0, so we roll a d10 plus 0. That's an 8. No slasher. Mythic Fate check. Do they find any painkillers for Rowena in the employee lockers? Likely. I rolled a 78. Yes. They also find 10 hand welders. So Ada, Therese, and Rowena all take one each as a weapon. Ada attempts an intellect check to see what the device is. She gets a 49 versus a 58. A success. The painkillers help to soothe Rowena's severe pain along with deadening her bad trip. She limply holds the hand welder they put into her hand so they think better of it and attach it to her belt. Ada speaks up after running some diagnostics on the jaunt pad with her PCT and browsing the contents of the disc clutched by the hand. "I believe this is some sort of short-range teleportation device. According to the information contained in this disc, it is still considered experimental and has led to madness in 100% of the test subjects. Perhaps that is what drove the killer?" "He wasn't even human," Therese gasped in frustration. "I'm not too sure about that," Ollie interrupted. "I think perhaps he was human at one point, and maybe this thing mutated him, or I don't know. Regardless, let's get to the control room and get out of this hellhole," Denzel said. He went to Rowena to help her to her feet, but she waved him away. "Those painkillers have helped quite a bit. I can at least walk on my own," she said, only slightly groggily. Denzel nodded and patted her on the shoulder. They set out once again down the corridor until they come to a door marked Control Room. The ambush score now goes to a 1. I'll roll a d10 plus 1. That's an 8. No slasher. They follow the same precaution, moving into the room slowly and carefully, shining their flashlights to illuminate the room. The room is a cockpit-type room with an outer space overlook. Numerous servers hum in the room, and all but one of the terminals are black. The one in the center has a glowing red font. Ada moves forward to interface with the active terminal and is interrupted by an intensely sweet voice over the loudspeakers.
"Oh, hello, my dears. Welcome to my room. I'm Miss K, the Hodder Habitat AI. My goodness, I have been quite lonesome. My baby boy doesn't speak much, so I've had no one to chat with. Please, sit a while, have some tea and biscuits."
A food synthesizer cabinet in the corner of the room hums to life, and bad-smelling oatmeal cookies and tea appear on a tray.
"What brings you to my humble abode? Have you met my baby boy?"
They all look at each other and are taken aback by the slew of questions. Denzel clears his throat. Hello, Miss K. I'm afraid we haven't met anyone except some serial killer who has severely wounded one of our companions. We need to get her off of this station so she can receive medical attention. How can we turn off the lockdown and open the blast doors? Mythic fate check. Does Kay tell the crew about the nanomachine cryopod so they can help Rowena? 32. Yes.
Oh my, a killer? I hope my baby boy is safe. He has a special pod in the cryo bay that has nanomachines enabled. It was an invention he and I collaborated on before he stopped talking. Those little buggers will fix your friend right up. I'm sure baby boy won't mind if you use it. But if you want to leave, you will need to operate both north and south generators at the same time. After a few minutes, the power will be restored, and you can open the docking bay once again. Are you sure you won't have tea?
And the synthesizer runs again, the new cups of tea pushing the previous ones onto the floor. Mythic fate check. Does Ada mention to Denzel in the presence of Kay that they're supposed to shut down the AI core as part of their mission? 78. No. But I think Denzel remembers. He just doesn't want to start more problems. No tea for us, thanks, Miss Kay. Are there any other crew members alive here on the station? Denzel asked politely.
Oh dear, I'm afraid not. It's just me and baby boy nowadays. I certainly miss all of the old smiling faces though. Perhaps you all would decide to stay here and become the new crew.
Sorry, Kay, we have to get back to our work. I really appreciate you helping us with this information. Mythic fate check. Does Miss K get angry when they try to leave? Likely. A roll of 98 though. Extreme no.
Oh my, well, I guess we all must go on. Please accept this map to help you on your way. And the cryo bay is just nearby. I think baby boy might be there now, if you want to stop and say hi.
Denzel looks very confused. Wait, baby boy is a person? He's not an AI like you?
Dear, oh dear, no. He's a big, strong man like you.
And she chuckles in her sweet voice. The crew all look at each other cautiously. Mythic fate check. Do they realize the baby boy is the slasher? Very likely. I rolled a 57. Yes. Is baby boy in the nano cryopod right now getting repaired? Denzel probes.
Why, I do believe he is, now that you ask. He does it quite often. It really started to harm his complexion, but he would not heed my warnings. He's such a rascal.
And she titters. Mythic fate check. Does anyone blurt out that he's a killer? Likely. I rolled a 13. Extreme yes. Uh-oh. Almost in unison, Therese and Rowena both blurt out, "He's a killer!" And, "He cut my arm off!" Denzel motions for them to be quiet, but they repeat it several times. Miss K is ominously quiet. Then her monitor begins to glow brighter and brighter red.
Don't you say that about my baby boy.
Her once sweet voice is now tinny and crackling.
He's a good boy. He just makes mistakes.
A loud siren begins to wail, and they can see flashing red lights outside in the corridor.
Baby boy, don't let them harm you. You're so sweet and innocent.
I'm going to increase the ambush score by +5, and then roll a d10 +6. That gives me a 16. The slasher appears. It's been such a short time, he hasn't recovered any wounds, but his health is back up to 25, and he has 2 out of 6 of his wounds. With a crash, the slasher comes barreling through a vent in the ceiling near the servers. He rips into one of the cabinets, grabbing a handful of wires that he uses to whip around.
Baby boy, no! That hurts your mother!
Miss K yells. There's a 30% chance that the damage causes an electrical explosion. I roll a 74, no explosion. I liked the fear save initiative that I did earlier, so we'll do that again. With an android in the party, it's tough to get any saves. Denzel rolls his fear save, fail, +1 stress. Therese fear save, fail, +1 stress. Ollie fear save, fail, +1 stress. Ada fear save, pass. Rowena fear save, fail, +1 stress. So Ada attacks. She rolls a 24 versus a 24. That's close enough for me to fail forward. She gets a +1 stress though. I roll on the one-page solo engine fail move table, and I get a 6, random event. I roll on the meaning tables, and I get delay plus hope. Great. Since she got a hit, I'm going to roll damage with her hand welder. I get a 2 damage. Slasher is down to 23 hit points. The slasher attacks. Who? Roll a d5. I get a 5. Rowena again. Good grief. Give the girl a break. Ada runs forward with her welder drawn and begins to burn at the slasher's exposed face in his helmet. It has healed somewhat from when they saw him last, but the mass of flesh and tumors is hard to distinguish between flesh and scars. Rowena points her welder at the killer as well, noting a fresh new hand on his necklace. "That's my hand, you freak!" Miss K shrieks when Ada strikes her baby boy, and the blast doors begin closing over the exit into the corridor. That's my delay hope. The slasher turns towards Rowena's outstretched hand and ignores Ada. He strikes out with his newly acquired whips at her good hand. Slasher attacks Rowena. I get a 55 versus a 65. A critical hit. Just great. He rolls a 2d10 of damage. That's 6. 6 hit points left. Rowena does a body save or she'll get stunned by the electrical wiring. D100 plus her military training. And she gets a 97 versus a 44. She's stunned. Since he got a critical hit, I'll give him a second attack against the now stunned Rowena. So the slasher attacks Rowena, and he gets a 1 versus a 65. 2d10 equals 7 damage, and that's all of her HP. I'm going to roll a wound and a death save. The whips do blunt force, and he gets a 4. Leg broken. I roll on the death save table, and I get a 7. She's dead. The whips wrap around Rowena's outstretched hand, and he gives them a yank. She's pulled from her feet and slams into the server cabinets. Her leg bends behind her awkwardly and breaks with an audible crack. He reaches down and grabs her by the hair of her head, and then throws her into the glass covering the cockpit overview. She impacts with a sickening smack and collapses in a heap on the floor. The crew all scream. Now to roll panic checks. Denzel, fail. He gets an adrenaline rush. Advantage on all rolls for the next 9 minutes. And I get to reduce 1d5 stress. He gets a 1. Reduce his stress to 6. Therese passes her panic save. Ollie passes his panic save. Ada fails her panic save. She gets the jumpy trait. She gains 1 stress, and all nearby crew gain 2 stress. Denzel and Therese are now at 8 stress. It's getting dangerous. Denzel attacks plus industrial with advantage. He gets a 54 and a 34 versus 50. That's a hit. He does 1d10, 9 damage. The slasher is now at 14 hit points. Therese attacks plus industrial. A 87 versus a 56. That's a fail. Plus 1 stress. Ollie attacks. 7 versus a 44. That's a hit. He's got the pulse rifle, which does a 3d10 damage. That's 13. The slasher down to 1 hit point. Finally, Ada attacks. She gets a 2 versus a 24. That's a hit. She's got the Vibechete. She does 4d10 equals 10 damage. The slasher takes a wound. And now he's down to 16 hit points. He's at 3 out of 6 wounds. I roll on the bleeding wound table, and he gets a laceration. Bleeding plus 1. Slasher attacks who? Roll a d4 to find out, and we get a 1. Denzel. He attacks with a 7 versus a 65. That's a hit. He does 2d10 damage with his whips. That's 17 minus 1 armor for Denzel. It's now destroyed. For 16 hit points of damage. Denzel takes a body save at advantage. 11 and a 1. That's a critical success. And I think I'll allow something special for Denzel, since he's my favorite. He does get a wound though. D10 at advantage equals 6 and a 6. Snapped collarbone. Disadvantage on all strength checks. He's now at 1 out of 2 wounds and 7 hit points. All of their crew begin to attack almost simultaneously. Ollie fires off a shot from Alina's pulse rifle that rips through the monster's chest. Denzel uses his welder on him and gives him lacerations on his arms as he tries to block the attacks. Ada, meanwhile, lashes out with the slasher's own Vibechete and takes chunks out of his flesh. Therese can't get a good shot at him without hitting her friends. The slasher sends his whips out at Denzel and they wrap around his arm and shoulder and snap his collarbone. He groans in pain and uses his hand welder to cut the whips off at the base. Mythic Fate check. Does the slasher attack unarmed? 37. Yes. Denzel attacks plus industrial at advantage. That's a 16 and a 39 versus 50. That's a hit. He does another 1d10 equals 7 damage. The slasher is now down to 9 hit points, minus 1 for bleeding. That puts him at 8 hit points. Therese attacks plus industrial. She gets a 72 versus a 56. That's a fail. Plus 1 stress. Ollie attacks as well. He gets a 55 versus a 44. That's a critical failure. He misses his shot and fumbles the pulse capacitor when attempting to reload. He loses his next attack. Plus he suffers a panic check. He passes his panic check. Ada attacks as well. 82 versus a 24. She fails. Plus 1 stress. Slasher attacks Denzel again. He gets an 88 versus a 65. A critical fail. I'm going to give Denzel an auto hit next round. Denzel's the only crew member to be able to land any attacks with his welder, lacerating the monster even further. Despite his wounds, the slasher is able to deflect the blows from Ada and Therese. Ollie clumsily drops his reload when he's attempting to charge the pulse rifle. He fumbles on the ground trying to pick it up. Denzel auto hit, so he does 1d10 damage. That's 6. The slasher's now down to 2 hit points, minus 1 from bleeding, so he's now at 1 hit point. Therese attacks, plus her industrial. She gets 38 versus a 56. That's a hit. She does 1d50 damage. 33 damage. Wow! That's 2 wounds. He's now at 5 out of 6 of his wounds. He's got 7 hit points left. Ollie reloads his pulse rifle. Ada attacks. 83 versus 24. That's another fail. And a plus 1 stress. The slasher rolls his wounds from Teresa's attack. He gets 1 bleeding and 1 gore, both of them with advantage. So this should be good. Bleeding, 8. Major artery cut. And his bleeding is now +5. That stacks with his other bleeding, so it's up to +6. From the gore table, we get ripped off flesh. Minus 1d10 strength. Got a 10. Since he doesn't have a strength score, we'll lower his instinct by 10 to 50. Fate check. Does the slasher try to escape now? I think yes. Fate check. Does the slasher try to escape? Very likely. We get a 45. Yes. Denzel once again hits the killer with his welder, lancing into the flesh. But Therese comes through with a massive hit from her laser cutter, slicing a big chunk of flesh from the beast's shoulder. It writhes in agony and tries to wrestle its Vibechete from Ada's grasp. We'll do an opposed strength check, Ada versus the slasher. Ada gets a 86 versus a 42, that's a fail. The slasher gets a 42 versus a 50, that's a pass. The creature wrests the Vibechete from the hands of Ada, then pushes her aside as he leaps for the glass covering the cockpit. He begins smashing at the plexi material to escape into space. Mythic fate check. Is he successful in the first attack on the glass? Unlikely. A 72. That's no. Denzel attacks again, plus industrial, at advantage. He gets a 32 and a 61 versus 50. That's a hit. Rolls 1d10 damage. That's a 6. The slasher's HP was at 1, minus the 6, so that's his last wound. We roll on the bleeding table and gets a 9. Throat slit or heart pierced, death save. Roll on the death save table, we get an 8, dead. I think he's really dead, but maybe fate has something else to say. Fate check. Is the slasher really dead? 96. Extreme no. Of course not. While he is frantically trying to escape, the killer doesn't see Denzel run up behind him and slice into his heart from his back with the welder. The massive form collapses in a heap. They all stand there staring at him. Miss K shrieks about her baby boy.
Baby boy!
Ada begins working to remove the logic core from the servers for Miss K. Out of breath from the adrenaline and the combat, Denzel says, "Therese! Get that door open! We're getting the heck out of here!" End of scene. Dang. That was a crazy session. I think for the next scene, we'll try something to kill this bastard off once and for all. Stay tuned for next time. Bye.